Ciao jewelry makers, my name is Joey Balistreri and today we're going to do a quick unboxing of the Curated Bead Box for November 2023. The little thumbnail sneak peek picture on the box is so exciting this month. The title is Persian Rug, which is such a unique title, and I just love the colors and I love the color of the findings that is in the box for a fall palette. It's so beautiful. So on this box we have always this disclaimer, if you can see this, that the bead sizes and types may vary due to availability. And then if you want extras of anything in the box, it's available on dollarbead.com using the model numbers which are here. So in this box you don't get an internal packing slip. Everything is listed here for you. And each of our Curated Bead Box subscription boxes contains a starter kit, which, as you've probably heard a lot, this box is really great if you are new to jewelry making, or if you need to make jewelry for children or inexpensive gifts, if you don't need check glass and gemstone beads and lampwork beads, because in this box it is a value box and you don't get those things generally. I can't even remember ever getting it. But you do get a huge selection with long strands of really great glass beads with really good looks. So let's get into this box together and see what we got this month. I love to curate my own beads for my designs because of my design background, but I have to say, even though I am able to do that, enjoy doing that, the bead subscription boxes that I get, it's like the best day of the month when they come in the mail. So they did not put everything in an organza bag this time. They gave it to us separately, so probably with gifts in mind. We'll set that aside and let's get into this. Oh wow, look you guys, look at this gorgeous color palette. I'm going to scoop everything out of here so that I can discard the noisy tissue paper. Oh, wow. So this just jumped out at me. Look at this gorgeous bead. Let's see what this is. This is a 20 millimeter champagne faceted glass bead, and there are two of them. Supposed to be, there's the other one, and they are drilled so unusually. Can you see? It's not running through the center of the bead. The drill is at the top from side to side rather than going vertically through the bead. These are stunning. They're a little bit heavy, but at the base of a Y necklace, for the final drop on a long Y necklace, that could be gorgeous. They could also be really great for the bookmarkers that I make, but how beautiful. So I'm going to pull everything aside and pull it in one by one. So on our list, it looks like we have three 10 millimeter strands of beads. So let me see if I can pull out the three 10 millimeter. They are gorgeous. Two of these 10 millimeter are crackle, and one is one of their marble style glass. And I tell you, even as I'm holding these in my hand, wait, this one, is this one 10 millimeter? Yes, it is. Even as I'm holding these in my hand, I love those three colors together. Just those three colors would make a really beautiful piece. So those are our three 10 millimeter, and as I said, it's a value box. So these are glass, but they do the marble style glass, so it does look like marble. And I love crackle glass beads. They are gorgeous. Now we have, looks like three strands of 8 millimeter beads. Let me find those. Oh, even those are really beautiful together. So this is pretty typical of the Curated Bead Box, these drizzle style glass beads. And honestly, it's never really been my favorite bead texture or finish, but I am loving this one. I think this is beautiful. It's a coppery orange, and the drizzle is just beautiful on it. It's a bronze drizzle, and honestly, this is really gorgeous. Even though in past boxes this drizzle has not been my favorite, I do really like it. And this marble style glass is also really pretty, and I just love the fall colors. And look how beautifully it is coordinating. Sometimes they'll put beads, in any subscription box that I don't get it, but this time I definitely do. It's beautiful so far. So the next is 3 strands of 6mm. I'm sorry, I'm reading my labels off to the side where it's not on the beading mat. And even look at those 3 together. So these are 3 marble strand style glass beads, all in 6mm. And I am just loving those colors. It truly does look like a Persian rug, but also it looks like when the leaves are changing on the trees, they just go to all these colors, from the browns to the oranges to the beiges, the golden colors and the reds and pinks. So this bead box, even though it is titled Persian Rug and a fall box, I think this can have a lot of uses year-round for a lot of projects. Look how stunning the collection is this month. For a value box, you just can't go wrong with these long strands of beads. You get so many, and you get the 3 sizes as well. So there is also a small 4mm strand of glass pearls in this beautiful taupe color, but it is not listed on the box. So I don't know if it was an error for them to not have typed it in the list of beads, or if it's a little bonus. But in past, I have had varying bead sides, and occasionally varying bead sizes, and occasionally you will be missing a piece. But if you contact them, they take care of it. But this is beautiful. This is a lovely strand of glass pearls. So also in this box, we have this, let me find it, 40 by 36mm bronze metal chandelier piece. I love the finish on this, and I also love all of the possible connection points. There's one at the top, there's one where you could hang something in the center of this negative space. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes across the bottom, but also, let me get my fingers out of the way, also you could use this loop or this loop, or this loop here, or this loop here. I mean, this is such a versatile, beautiful component to work with. It's just stunning. Again, sometimes I see something like this, and maybe I think it would be too large or too busy for me for a necklace, but for one of my bookmarkers, that could be a really lovely component to add in. And then we got some bead caps. Let me get one of my little dishes. We got some bead caps, and these are, I have some of these already in my supplies, but they are lovely. They're not super concave, they're a little bit flat, so sometimes I use those as spacers, but it's really nice to add that gold presence. I love when they do the gold, because if you guys have watched me at all, you know that gold is my favorite, and I really particularly love the gold with this palette. I think it was a great choice for them. Oh, these are unusual. Let's see what size these are. These are 4mm gold metal bead caps. We get approximately 40 of these. These are very unusual. They're very small. I don't think I have anything this small in my bead cap stash. But they have an unusual, let me take one and see if I can show you what's unusual about this. Can you see that it has a long shank? So you know what that would be great for if you have any beads, and I don't know if that's the case in this box, but any beads with a large hole that you need to stabilize it, this could fit inside that hole and take up that space and make the bead not wobble around, make it quite secure. Those are so interesting. And there again, you know how sometimes I like to stack things together, either direction. I cannot wait to play with those. Those are interesting, and I know that I don't have anything like that in my supplies. And then, yes, apparently they were thinking gifts this month because I have never received gift tags in the past in any of my curated bead box. So I will put that with the organza bags. I'm not sure if that's what I'm going to do with my curated box this month, but that is an unusual and lovely idea. And then, as always, we have our findings pack. And again, if you are fairly new or brand new to jewelry making, you get a little bit of everything so you can try different styles. We get the crimp beads in this. These are not the crimp tubes. These are the crimp beads that you flatten with your pliers, but they are quite useful. And when you're doing anything small, this can be a really great way to crimp. And we get a little bit of stretch cord, and they always give that nice, thick, very durable stretch cord. So I do stretch bracelets with what they give us in this finding pack. And we get ear wires and lobster claw clasps and some jump rings and some head pins with the flat head. We get some gold bead stringing wire. I think this is 7-strand. That's what it usually is. And quite a few coils of memory wire, bracelet size memory wire. So this is just a really great pack. And again, I am thrilled that they did gold this month. So let me clean up my mat, and I'm going to come back and we're going to make something. And I already have a great idea. I was making something a little bit earlier for myself with some beads from my supplies, from my own supplies that I curated myself. And I think these beads would lend themselves beautifully to the design. So let me show you. This is my sample piece. And again, I have been watching the runway shows for going into 2024. And another trend that I noticed on the runway models from the various fashion houses were cuff bracelets. And so I wanted to make a cuff bracelet for myself. So this is the design that I came up with using memory wire. It has 5 sections, and I don't know if you're able to see it in the camera and with all the beads on my mat, but I created a pattern on each ring of the memory wire so that when I strung it together as a cuff, my gold beads would create this pattern on the top of the cuff, and also my raspberry sort of fall pink beads would create a pattern that continued around the cuff. So this is what I have been working on, and when I looked at the thumbnail on this curated bead box, I thought those beads could be great for this design. So let me clean everything up and I will be back with you, and we will use this box and I'll show you how to make a beautiful runway inspired, going forward into spring, summer 2024 cuff bracelet using our beautiful glass beads and gold findings from the curated bead box. I'll see you in a minute. I have returned and I have chosen from the box the strands that I want to use in my cuff bracelet and cut them open, because I feel like for myself, when I release the beads and have them on my mat, I design better and I am better with creating patterns. I've also taken out our coils of the bracelet memory wire that came in the box, and I think that I'm going to be using both of the gold bead caps that came in the box. But before we get started, I'm going to share my process a little bit with you on creating this cuff bracelet, and I'm going to quickly show you what went into the one that I created for myself from my own supplies, just in case any of you see this and want to know what goes into it. So these gold cylinder beads with this lovely brushed texture on them came from PurityBeads.com. I found this seller at one of the bead shows here in Orlando and really love his products. They're e-coated, so they're anti-tarnish, and I just thought this was beautiful. It was something I had purchased to design with. And then also at that bead show, I had picked up a strand of these, they're either 3 or 4 millimeter raspberry colored faceted rondelle crystals, and so those went into the pattern, so you'll see it throughout this cuff bracelet, and even one crystal on each end when I finished it off. And this is all that I have left of these beautiful raspberry agate beads. I know that they're 6mm and I don't remember where I got them, but a 6mm raspberry agate should not be too hard to find. And then these beautiful check glass 6mm round faceted beads came from either Bead Box Bargains or Dollar Bead. Let me tell you, I think this is Bead Box Bargains. I do not know if this is still on their website, but I had it in my supplies for who knows how long. So there's the number. There was 20 pieces. They were 6mm check fire polished glass faceted round beads, and they are in a crystal violet swirl mix. So that's what I have left of those. I only had 20 when I was designing the bracelet, so I had to intersperse them into my patterns as evenly as I could, and you'll see that I made them as a little bit of a focal. And it was a mix, so you'll see some of them almost are just a crystal color, and then some of them had some black and burgundy and raspberry swirled into the glass. I just love them. I just thought they were beautiful. So I mixed those throughout my patterns on the cuff. And then we have a lovely bead shop here in Orlando. It's a small business, and she carries a lot of Indian glass, so I purchased this from her quite a few years ago. So these are 8mm raspberry colored, burgundy colored Indian glass beads. So I don't know if you'll find the exact thing, but maybe something similar. And then from the Halcraft e-commerce website, which is shut down now, I bought these check glass beads that have this beautiful raspberry color. And I think I used to buy bundles from them where you would get 3 or 4 strands in for the price. So one thing I will say about creating a cuff bracelet like this, I really tried to stay with mostly 6mm beads or smaller because of the weight. And because when it is on, I want it to stay together, and I don't want to feel like that the weight of the beads is pulling the memory wire off my arm. Now I looked at this and thought I might want to add a closure, some kind of a clasp here, but I decided I probably won't do that unless I start feeling like I'm going to lose it. But because I stayed with the 6mm beads for most of the bracelet and just placed my little bit larger beads in between the smaller beads and used a lot of those really small crystals, the weight is good, and it doesn't feel like it's so heavy that it's going to come off of my arm. So the other trick in doing a bracelet like this is to keep your smaller beads at the ends of the cuff on each coil as well as the final connecting bar, because when you put the larger beads, 8mm beads, or even these solid cylinder beads were quite heavy. I know it's hard for you to see that in the picture, but like when I hold them in my hand, they're quite heavy. So I left those away from the 2 ends of my cuff so that the weight of the beads doesn't pull it down like that when I'm wearing it. So those are just some little tips. Now, also I will say this, admittedly, I had to restring a couple of these strands because I created a very intricate pattern where I wanted those gold cylinder beads to make that kind of checkerboard pattern at the top. So in order to get the pattern right, I had to fool around with changing each of the coils before I was happy with the way everything was laying. But if you're a beginner or you want a more relaxing stringing experience, then don't create a pattern, just string your beads, which I laid these out from our curated box this month, and they just look great together. So I think on the one we're going to make together will be a more simple pattern and a more simple stringing process. So a couple of things you can do when you need to create multiple patterns that are going to sit next to each other to create one complete look. I will sometimes use this board, and I'll show you how a little bit of my process on how I did my bead patterns on this one. This board is quite large for my mat and to fit under my camera, but if you can see, it has the 0 measurement here. So this will be the center piece on each coil, and then I can create my pattern building my beads out in each direction. So normally with this medium size memory wire bracelet wire, it's about 8 inches full of beads to make a complete round. So that gives me, I know when I'm stringing, it gives me from here to here is 4 inches. So that will be one side of my bracelet, and from here to here is the other 4 inches. So that is my complete 8 inches around, and this is my center on my bracelet. So that is helpful. The other thing that I have is from Louisa at Misty Moon on her Etsy shop. She has these designing rods. My son absolutely loves to work with these when he's making jewelry with me, but they're very small. And if you are struggling with laying out a bead pattern, if you did want to do something a little bit more involved, these can be really helpful. And I do use them. The only thing I don't like about these is when I want to reorganize my pattern, or once I've gone and I say, oh, wait, I don't like this section, or I want to take that bead out. On these rods, you have to take everything off and redo your pattern, where when I use the beading board, I can just pick things up, move them around until I love the way the pattern is laying. But if you are struggling at all with your patterns with your beads, or you really need to see things laid out, these are great. They come like this. They come with an extra package of stoppers. I have some other junk in here, but that is just a little bit of advice. You know, sometimes when I see people that don't have experience making memory wire bracelets, it's haphazard and they just like throw the beads on. And a random pattern is not always a bad thing, but there is a way to give this a more polished, little bit upscale look in your process of making a memory wire bracelet. So measuring can be really important, especially when you're making multi rounds of beads that need to fit together. It's really important that they be almost the same length, and you know, a little tiny bit of variation won't show. But even getting the length of your coils right, when you know that at the end you have to connect the whole thing together, it's good to have that in your mind in advance so you don't have to redo things. So we're going to do the same thing, a 5-strand bracelet. Now you can do 3 strands would be like if you could envision this, if it was only the center 3. So if you want a more narrow cuff, you could do only 3 strands. And if you want a much wider, more dramatic cuff, you could go up to 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever your heart desires. I mean, you can really take this design and run with it. So we will absolutely need memory wire cutters. This is stainless steel cable that retains its shape, and if you use your regular cutters on this, you will damage them. You will put a sort of a divot in the blade, and you will have to replace them. Then when you're doing finer work, you'll see that you start to have problems. So we will need these cutters that are made for memory wire, and this is not absolutely necessary, but I have this tool. It's a snub nose plier that is made for curling the ends on memory wire, and it has the larger mandrel and the smaller mandrel. I will be using the smaller one on this project. This is not necessary. It's just a little bit easier on the memory wire, but you can use your regular round nose pliers to do this for sure. So I also have my other pliers and tools out here. So we're going to start by cutting 5 coils, and I hope that you'll be able to see this in the camera. So what I do, and they don't have to be exact, and I'll show you why about the loops, something that's a little bit forgiving and gives you a little space to not have a perfect measurement. And also you might even use, if you're nervous about cutting the size of your coils, you might even make a mark with a permanent marker. I'm not going to do that. I tend to do these measurements with my heart, as you guys have heard me say a few times. But so what I'm going to do is have maybe about an inch or so of overlap. So if you can see, let me grab this with these cutters, and then I'm trying to keep my arms out of the way of the camera. Let me grab these with the cutters and see if you can see the space. Can you see that I'm going to leave myself an overlap of about an inch or so? I'm just guesstimating, and that's where I'm going to cut my first coil as I send my beads flying. So if you can see, that's the amount of overlap. And then I want to do this 4 more times. I'm doing 5. If you want to use the entire coil or even bring in some other memory wire, and you can sort of measure once you have one cut, you can sort of measure where the next one is going to be cut, so they will be pretty much all the same. I have cut all 5 of my rounds of memory wire, and now I want to start creating patterns before I touch that or start stringing. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of my process, and then I'm going to go off camera and do the stringing, because you know, watching someone string beads on wire is like watching grass grow, and we don't want that. I don't want you to fall asleep. So I am going to start, as I did on this one, with my center coil and then build out from there. So I'm going to use, I think, these orange beads, at least one of them. So I'm just going to start, give myself an idea with my where my pattern is going. And one of the things I don't care for about this style of glass bead and the finish is the way the ends, the drill hole turns out on these. So I'm absolutely going to include bead caps over this. So I'm going to lay those out here so that I see where my gold is going to appear in the pattern. And this is going to be a lot less involved pattern than that one. So I think I will make this focal have 3 of these orange beads right in the middle. And I may add additional bead caps, but for now I'm going to go with that. And I tell you, one of the things that I saw a lot of on the runway was red. Red is just a really big color for this season, and I saw red coats. I saw a lot of red. I am not generally a huge person for red. I lend to more the pinks and berries more, but it's really pretty, and it's really pretty this way, where like this and this red is just interspersed in this marble style glass bead. And I like having the little pops of red in my pattern, so it's not such a red bracelet. These coils are about, it takes about 8 inches of beads, so you can measure in this linear way. I just glanced in the camera and realized that I'm creating a pattern out of your view. It is so hard to talk and design and stay in camera. I'm getting better at it, but sometimes I get so involved in what I'm making that I forget that the camera's rolling and that you need to see what I'm doing. So give me just a moment to move everything up and so that you can see. Okay, so in fact, maybe I will take out one of these little rods. I usually get started with just laying things on my mat. So these rods have a little stopper on the end, and I'm going to take that off. And so yeah, and that's what I say, what I don't love about them, you can work from both sides, but when the camera's off, I will probably pull my beadboard in that I showed you, because I can pick and choose and move things around until I get settled on the pattern that I'm going to go with. And you do have to be careful with these rods, because you can create, and everything slides off one end. And I've also, the ends are really sharp, so you do have to be careful not to hurt yourself with those. I think I'm going to do more gold showing, since this is going to be the very center the very center coil on my cuff bracelet, and it will be the larger beads. So I think I am actually going to add in those extra bead caps. You can see it's really pretty. We'll have a little bit more gold appearing in the center of the bracelet. So that's going to be my starting point. And then I think I will do some red, and I'm going to play with these amazing bead caps. That is so pretty. So I think I'll do maybe alternate. Yeah, another one. I'm going to do another one that way, and then do one of these marble red beads, and then another one this way. And let's see, I think I will switch to another. So as I said, I need to take a few minutes to work out my pattern, and I'm going to do this stringing off camera, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of my design process and the way I come up with patterns. And I'm sure that those of you that have experience, you probably do something similar, or you have your own process that you use to create your patterns. I'm just going to repeat that same thing on this side, and I'm going to create this as my center coil and then work my way out, and I'm going to get that set up, and then I will be back and show you what I have done. So I have been stringing, and I just wanted to come back and show you where I am at in my coils so far. So I've completed this center pattern. I know there's a lot happening on the mat beneath my finished strand, but this is pretty much exactly 8 inches, and that's going to be the center coil, and that's the center, and then this is what's going to go on either side of that. And if you can see, I've placed the beads so that the larger beads in the center focal here are laying next to the 6mm smaller beads. So when the coils are all placed together, they lay together nicely. There's not a whole bunch of the larger beads all pushing my coils out like that. So that's my method so far. And so I'm just going to show you what I came up with on that pattern. So I'm stringing one of those red and white marble beads, 2 of those really tiny spacer beads, another marble bead, and then these just look really good back to back. So that's what I've been doing. I really like that. I really like that look back to back. And let's see, this would be next. And then I'd like to keep the gold presence right at the top of each of my coils. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm in danger of losing my beads because I'm working from both ends. As I said, when I use my board, then I can pick things up and move them around, or if I look and say, oh wait, I want to take that bead cap out, I don't have to take everything off like you do with these rods. But that being said, I do work with these rods, and I do really love them. They make a multi-strand design like this much easier to work out. And on this, I am actually doubling. If you can see what I'm doing a bead cap facing that bead, and then I'm doing a bead cap facing away, and then putting another bead in there, and then I'm going to repeat the same thing on this side. One facing that 8mm bead, and then one facing away. And so these will be exactly the same. These patterns will be exactly the same. So that's where I am so far. I'm going to keep designing my patterns and working out my 8-inch increments, and I'll be back and show you where I'm at. So now all 5 of my rows of this cuff are completed. I've settled on the bead patterns that I like and how I want the beads to nestle into each other. If you can see the pattern I've created, I've alternated the larger with the smaller beads so they're not competing for space when I place them close to each other. And so the only thing to mention is that I ran out of the bead caps that came in the box, so I did have to go into my own stash and get, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 bead caps. So if you are going to do this exactly the way that I did it, you will need 10 bead caps from your own supplies. It wasn't a problem for me. In fact, I had these left over, the ones that I pulled in from another box. So it wasn't a problem for me. And there is one other thing to note about doing this, in case you are doing a different pattern or you have decided to do more coils. You do need to save out enough beads that when you string it, you will need a bead in between each of your coils. So let me show you on my sample. You will need to count how many beads you need in case you're doing extra coils. So on this one, I did 1 bead in between, so there's 8 total that you need for a 5-row bracelet. And then on this one, I had those little crystals, so I also included those, but we don't have a small bead in this box, so on this one, I think I'm going to do it plain. And so now it is simply a matter of turning our loops on the end and stringing this. So let me do that, and I will be right back with you. I'm going to show you how I turn my loops on the end. As I said at the outset, we're going to use this snub nose plier that's made for memory wire, and I'm going to use the smaller mandrel on it, and I'm only going to turn one side. So I am going to get a hold of the end and give it a little bend and just rotate my plier around until I get a good loop. Now you can turn only a single loop, or you can go twice. I am going to go twice on this end, or 1.5 times. I just want to make sure that I don't have that sharp bit hanging out. But that is the forgiving part of the way that we measured cutting all 5 loops. And why I mentioned I would talk to you about the finish is that you barely see the loops once this cuff is connected. So you don't have to stress so much about the overlap when you're cutting your rings, and you don't have to stress so much about the perfection of these loops because they get hidden in this design. So now it is a simple matter of stringing. So I'm going to uncap one of my rods. If you were doing this on a board, then you could just pick the beads up and string them on, and just string them in the pattern that I have laid out. It's simple and relaxing. Once the design is done, once the pattern is created, then this is just a relaxing project. You can put a movie on. It actually does not take too very long. So I did have plenty of beads left, and I have yet to decide what I'm going to use as my spacer bead. When I started stringing, I was thinking about what this finished end would look like. So I was planning, I set aside 8 of the brown marble style glass beads, but I had both of the red left over, and I may end up doing the red because, as I said, I've been watching the fashion shows, the runway shows, and red is a big color this season. And since I don't wear a lot of red, this might be a good way to incorporate that into my wardrobe. And mixed in these beautiful Persian rug colors, the Curated Bead Box has done a really good job with clever names recently. I really like what they have come up with. So I am going to continue stringing all 5 of my strands. With each one, you turn your first loop and then string, and then turn the final loop to close it off. And then if you guys are making along with me, when we come back together, you will need some 18 gauge wire to finish the cuff. So if you want to come back, get your supplies, and we will finish up our beautiful cuff bracelet together. I have completed all 5 of my coils for the cuff bracelet, and I have them laid out here in order. After I turned the final loops, I just place them in the order that I want to place them and connect them for the final cuff. And so I just thought I would turn this final end loop with you. And if you remember at the beginning of the tutorial, I mentioned to do 1.5 to 2 loops here. And the reason that I'm doing it this way is if you had extra in your coil from when you first cut them, you could trim it away. But you can also, if you're doing your loops that way, you could also make that adjustment in how many turns you make here at the end. And as I said, this design, really these loops become hidden in between the beads on the back of the cuff. So you don't really have to so much stress about those coils. So that is the final one. And now I'm going to bring in this 18 gauge wire, and I keep a little bit of a junkie or a cutter for this heavy gauge wire. And let me see, I want to make sure it's nice and straight, because these are the final ends of the cuff bracelet where we're going to make a bar. And I'll show you on this one, that final bar that connects it is this 18 gauge wire. And so when you're cutting your wire, you need to leave yourself the length of wire for the width of your cuff, and then enough space to turn that final loop. Now on this one, I had a small crystal bead as well as the width of my cuff, which I will not have on this particular design with our curated bead box beads. But I also don't want to run out of wire and short myself, so I'm going to be a little bit generous and do that. And I want 2 pieces exactly the same. So let me do the straightening once again. Just bring my nylon jaw plier and start out with a nice straight. This is way too long for what I need, so I will be cutting it again. But I just don't like to be short of wire and then have to redo it because I was too short. So on this, I am going to still continue to use my snub nose plier, and I'm just going to grab a hold of it using that same small mandrel and just turn that loop and just make it so that the loop goes right back down to the wire, and remove the tool. So now I want to take my first round of the cuff and string this 18 gauge wire through. Now I decided on the red beads. I had beads of everything left over, but in your patterns, don't forget to leave yourself extra beads for this end spacing that must be done. So I'm going to string a red bead. You could also alternate the colors here. I just happen to like it this way. Then my next coil that's in the lineup will get strung. I missed the wire. Will get strung there, and then another one of those red beads, which has now become a spacer. And then this is my center coil. So that's the next in the line. And you just continue that way. Oh, I got 2 beads stuck together. That happens. That happens sometimes with the glass beads that have this marble style finish on it. And then this is next in the design, and then a red bead, and then the final coil. So if you can see how it's coming together, and this bead gives me the exact same space between all of my rounds, which gives it that nice cuff look, even though it's a beaded cuff. And so if you wanted these to be closer together, you would need to switch to a smaller bead here. And if you wanted more negative space in between, then a larger bead. But you do want to be careful in choosing what's going to go here so that there is enough space so they're not pushed together and it doesn't lay nicely on the arm. So that's the finished design, and I am going to take this out now because, as I said, I did leave it too long. I'm going to take it out and cut it right about there, and then I'm going to match up my other side. I can use that to remove that much as a measurement to remove that much, and I have to turn this around because I'm right-handed, and at this point on this end you do sort of need to hold everything together while you make that turn, but on the other end it won't be as difficult. So I'm just going to use that. It's still a little bit too long, and I did that on purpose just to see how it lays. That's what I did on my other one, and on my other one I did have to shorten one of my loops a tiny bit, and I'm going to do the same thing again here. So I'm just going to take the flush side of this cutter, if you can see, and I'm just going to remove about half of that loop, and now I'm going to come in again with that snub nose plier and just a little trick if you need to shorten it. And there, that is perfect. I just want to make sure this loop is nice and straight. So that is perfect. And now you get a glimpse of the finished cuff. So I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side, and I'll come back and try this on for you and put up some pictures of the final product. So I have finished my entire bracelet. All of my sections of this cuff have come together to make one final bracelet, and I've done my final loops, and I did decide on the red spacer beads. And I just have to say that the Curated Bead Box did a fabulous job this month with this Persian Rug collection. It is stunning. The colors are beautiful together, and I love the size of the beads, and I love the unusual 4mm tiny gold bead caps that just added such an unusual metal presence in between my beads. So I am just thrilled with the way this turned out. So I wanted to just give you a couple of other options with this design. I opted on both of my bracelets to do patterns, but you could really simplify this design and make this look like more of a solid cuff if you use the exact same bead all the way around each coil or alternated rows of beads. You could really modify this. I opted to create patterns and incorporate all of the colors in both of these designs really, but an option is to simply do the same bead, and then you would get that more solid color and really a traditional cuff look. The other thing you can do with this design is a type of a spacer bar. I did not have one that was right for these beads or that was the right size for the millimeter size to space them out, but these could be done with a spacer bar. If you've seen these, this one is, as I said, quite small and too small and not really the right look for this collection of beads. But any kind of a spacer bar that has the number of holes that you need for the amount of sections you would want on this design would be really lovely. And you have to look at how far apart they are in the space, but you could get an idea that you could connect. So if you didn't like this little bit of separation on the top, if you had the right spacer bar, you could modify this design. So I really hope you guys were inspired to do something fun and beautiful with your Curated Bead Box this month, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video, and that you had some kind of a takeaway, some new technique or something that you learned. It was so much fun for me. I was so inspired by this box. So I just want to thank you all for watching and spending time with me today, and will ask you to please like my video, tap that little thumbs up that's underneath the video, and subscribe to my channel and tap the little bell so that you don't miss when I upload a new video. And I just want to say thank you again, and have fun on your beading mats. Ciao, jewelry makers.